The house did not feel empty. That was the first problem. Eleanor Shaw noticed it the moment she stepped inside alone, before the boxes were unpacked, before Adam carried in the last suitcase, before the sound of their life had a chance to settle into the walls. Empty houses echo. This one absorbed. The air felt held, as if the rooms were already familiar with the shape of people standing inside them. Eleanor paused just beyond the threshold, keys still warm in her palm, listening to the silence rearrange itself around her. The house responded in subtle ways. A low mechanical sigh somewhere deep within the walls. The disciplined ticking of a clock left behind by the previous owner, the faintest hum that stopped the moment she tried to isolate it. She told herself this was normal. Old houses breathe. Old houses settle. Old houses make sounds that don't belong to any single source. Still, she didn't move for several seconds. Then Adam brushed past her, cheerful, carrying a box labelled Kitchen Fragile, and the spell broke. "Smells like fresh paint," he said, "and money well spent." Eleanor smiled automatically and stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a soft, decisive click. Adam thrived on structure. Contracts, deadlines, inspections, everything in its proper category, everything accounted for. He loved the house for exactly the reasons Eleanor hesitated around it. The ceilings were high but not ostentatious. The staircase curved gently, confident without needing to announce itself. The walls were thick, sound-dampening in a way that made the street outside feel distant, irrelevant. "This place is solid," Adam said, running his hand along the banister. "You can feel it." Eleanor nodded, though she wasn't sure solidity was what she felt. She worked as a freelance editor. Her job was to sense intention in language, to hear what was implied rather than stated. Years of cutting excess had trained her ear to recognize when something didn't belong. And something here didn't. Not a single thing she could name. Just timing. When Adam went to fetch more boxes, Eleanor wandered into the living room. The previous owner had left no furniture, no marks of personality. Still, the room didn't feel neutral. It felt prepared. The windows faced the street directly, but the glass was subtly tinted, not enough to notice unless you were looking for it. Eleanor stepped closer. From outside, people would see movement. From inside, you could see detail. She pulled back, unsettled. "Ellie?" Adam called. "You all right?" "Yes," she said. The word came easily. It would come easily for a long time. They had bought the house from Rupert Hale. That name appeared everywhere on the deed, the solicitor's correspondence, the energy certificate, yet Eleanor realized, unpacking their files later that evening, that she had never once heard his voice. He had not attended the viewing. He had not been present for the inspection. He had not come to the handover. Everything had passed through Celia Markham, the estate agent, efficient, polished, reassuring in the way people are when they know exactly how much reassurance is expected. "He values privacy," Celia had said. "He travels a lot." Adam had nodded approvingly. Privacy, to him, was a sign of success. To Eleanor, it was a narrative choice. That night, after the boxes were stacked and the kitchen half-functional, Eleanor lay in bed, listening to Adam's breathing slow into sleep. She stared at the ceiling. The smoke detector sat directly above the bed, its small dark lens angled slightly toward the center of the room. She knew smoke detectors often looked like that. She also knew she had never paid attention to one like this before. A faint click broke the silence. Not loud, not sharp, just precise. Eleanor held her breath. Another click followed, slightly offset, as if in response. Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from recognition. This sound was deliberate. She turned her head toward Adam. He slept on, utterly untroubled. Eleanor did not wake him. Instead, she listened, and listened, until the click stopped, not gradually, but cleanly, as if something had finished adjusting. The upstairs study became Adam's domain almost immediately. He liked the symmetry of it, desk centered under the window, shelves lining both walls, everything squared and rational. Eleanor helped him unpack books on the third day. She noticed the skirting board while crouching to slide a heavy box into the corner. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't newly painted. It was clean in a way that suggested recent attention. Not the whole wall, just a section roughly a meter long. Eleanor ran her fingertip along it. No dust. She leaned closer. The air carried a faint chemical sharpness, like disinfectant. "Adam," she said casually, "did you wipe this wall?" He glanced over. "No." "Why?" "It smells." "Cleaned." Adam shrugged. "Probably from when the previous owner moved out. You're sensitive to smells." She smiled, accepting the explanation outwardly. But when she pressed her palm lightly against the wall, she felt it. A subtle vibration, so faint she might have dismissed it if it hadn't stopped the instant she pulled her hand away. That night, Eleanor dreamed of standing in the study, while someone stood just behind the wall, breathing carefully, trying not to be heard. Their neighbour introduced herself on the fourth evening. Margaret Pritchard stood at the door with a plate of biscuits. Posture formal, smile controlled. "Welcome to the street," she said. "I'm next door." She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, eyes moving through the hallway with quick familiarity. "So," Margaret said, "how are you finding it?" "Lovely," Adam replied. "Very quiet." Margaret nodded. "The walls help with that." Eleanor watched her carefully. "Did you know the previous owner?" Margaret hesitated a fraction too long. "Not well," she said. "He kept to himself." Her eyes flickered upward. Eleanor followed the glance, instinctively sealing, landing corners where light pooled unevenly. Margaret smiled again. "Old houses have funny acoustics. You'll hear less than you expect. Hear less. Not hear things. Less." Margaret left without asking their surnames. Eleanor stood in the doorway long after, watching her disappear next door. The first time Eleanor saw the red dot, she thought it was a reflection. It hovered on the living room wall, just above the mantel, steady, precise, too deliberate to be light from outside. She froze. The dot did not move when she shifted. It did not flicker. Eleanor took a step forward. The dot vanished. Not faded. Vanished. She stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, scanning the room for explanation. Nothing. That night, when Adam asked if she was all right, she said yes. She had already begun editing her own fear. The email arrived on the 6th day. Subject: Final Property Pack, Hale Residence. Eleanor opened it without expectation. Then she saw the attachment. The floor plan was not the one from the listing. This one showed shaded areas between rooms' narrow, intentional spaces, each labelled in precise type: service void, access hatch, observation point. Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly. No one labels a space observation point by accident. She walked the house with the plan open on her phone, matching dimensions, corners, wall thickness. Every alignment tightened something in her chest. There were spaces in the house that were not meant for living, only for watching. Adam dismissed it at first. "Old plans," he said. "Drafts. Something theoretical." "Observation point isn't theoretical," Eleanor replied. He smiled tightly. "You're spiraling." That word landed harder than he intended. Spiraling meant unreliable. Eleanor nodded, outwardly calm. But that night, she stood alone in the study, palm against the wall, feeling the vibration return faint, steady, alive. Eleanor waited until Adam slept. Then she took a torch and screwdriver into the study. She found the seam. The hidden latch? The skirting board gave way with a quiet release. Behind it, a compact black camera embedded cleanly into the wall. The lens was warm, active. Eleanor staggered back. Her breath came fast, shallow. She turned into the hallway and froze. Opposite the bedroom door, a faint rectangle marked the wall. A frame had been removed. Behind it, a small, deliberate peephole pointed directly at their bed. Eleanor understood then. The house had not been sold unfinished. It had been left operational. She shook Adam awake. "We have to leave," she whispered. Adam followed her into the hallway. He saw the peephole, and in that moment, structure failed him. The house had not just been watching, it had been waiting. They didn't leave. Not because Eleanor had changed her mind, but because the body doesn't always obey the mind when fear becomes logistical. Adam stood in the hallway in his bare feet, staring at the peephole as if it might blink. Eleanor had expected him to shout, to swear, to smash the wall open with his fists. Instead, he did something worse. He became quiet. He walked to the bathroom, washed his face, and returned, looking faintly altered, as if he'd stepped into a version of himself built for emergencies. "We document," he said, voice measured. "We photograph. We call the police. We don't touch anything else." Eleanor nodded. She didn't tell him she'd already touched the skirting, already felt the warmth of the lens, already crossed the invisible line between suspicion and certainty. Adam took photos of the peephole, the wall cavity, the seam of paint. He did it carefully, like evidence might obey him if he was formal enough. Eleanor watched him and felt a small, bitter ache. He still believed in structure. He still believed the world would respond correctly if presented with the right information in the right order. They didn't speak much as they waited for morning. When the light finally arrived, it did nothing to soften the house. It only made everything clearer, the clean lines, the well-painted surfaces, the polite architecture that held secrets without showing strain. Eleanor's first instinct was to go outside, to stand in the open air where walls could not contain her. Then she remembered the tinted glass, the thick walls, Margaret's phrasing. "You'll hear less than you expect." She realized she didn't want air. She wanted distance from being seen. The police arrived just after 10. A single officer at first, Callum Reed. Young, conscientious, slightly apologetic by nature, he stepped into their hallway and glanced around with professional neutrality that didn't quite hide his discomfort at being inside someone else's home. Adam spoke first, crisp and controlled. He handed Callum his phone, scrolling through photographs like a solicitor presenting exhibits. Eleanor watched Callum's face shift. Not disbelief. Interest. Concern. He followed them upstairs into the study. Adam pointed out the open skirting, the seam, the cavity. Callum crouched, shone his torch inside. "This is unusual," he said quietly. Eleanor's chest loosened a fraction. Being believed is a kind of medicine. Adam pushed. "We need this escalated. Forensic. Someone to confirm." Callum nodded. "We'll take a report. His phone rang. He stepped aside, answered in a low voice. Eleanor couldn't hear words, only the tone professional, then guarded, then faintly strained. When he returned, he looked different. Not hostile. Careful. Like someone had reminded him what kind of street he was standing on. "There's a complication," he said. Adam's jaw tightened. "What complication?" Callum avoided Eleanor's eyes. "The device you described, there's nothing here." Eleanor blinked. "What?" Callum pointed into the cavity. It was empty. The camera was gone. Only the neat outline remained, a shadow in the dustless space where it had been mounted. For a second, Eleanor's mind refused to accept it. Her brain tried to protect her with denial so fast it almost felt like relief. Maybe it wasn't there. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe. But she remembered the warmth, the heat of recent use, the bodily certainty. Adam's voice rose, sharp. "That's impossible. It was there last night." Callum's expression softened into something clinical. Sometimes people misinterpret what they see at night. Stress, moving house, lack of sleep. Eleanor felt the insult in the gentleness. The implication wasn't that she was lying. It was worse. It was that she was unreliable. Adam pulled up the photo again and shoved the screen toward Callum. "This is the camera. This is the lens." Callum stared at the image for a long moment. He didn't deny it. But he didn't accept it either. "I can only act on what's present," he said quietly. "We can make a note. We can advise security improvements." Security improvements. Eleanor almost laughed. The house had been built for surveillance. Suggesting improvements felt like suggesting curtains to someone being followed. Callum glanced at the peephole. His face tightened. "We'll file the report," he repeated, and his voice carried the subtle weight of retreat. When he left, Adam stood in the doorway watching him walk away down the drive, hands clenched. Eleanor felt something colder than fear settle into place. Authority had entered. Authority had seen. And authority had chosen not to stay. They tried to turn the house into a crime scene. Adam taped over the peephole with thick black tape. He wedged a chair against the bedroom door, absurd and angry. He installed a temporary camera of their own in the hallway, aimed at the wall opposite their bed like a kind of desperate symmetry. Eleanor watched him work. A part of her wanted to tell him, if someone can remove a camera from inside your wall without waking you, your tape means nothing. But she didn't say it. She let him perform control because it was keeping him upright. That night, Eleanor woke at 2:13. She didn't know why. No nightmare. No sound that belonged to the dream world. Just sudden alertness, like someone had flipped a switch inside her. She lay still, listening. The house held its breath. Then, softly, a click. Not upstairs. Not downstairs. In the bedroom, Eleanor's eyes drifted to the smoke detector. A faint red pinprick blinked once, then held steady. Eleanor's throat closed. She reached for her phone slowly, keeping her movement minimal, like prey trying not to trigger pursuit. She lifted the phone camera and aimed upward. The red dot vanished. Her screen captured only dim ceiling texture, harmless plastic, darkness. Eleanor lowered the phone and stared. A second later, the click came again clean, satisfied, as if whatever was watching had tested her reaction and noted the result. Eleanor turned her head toward Adam. He was awake too. She could tell by the stillness of his breathing. He didn't speak. Neither did she. In the morning, he said, carefully. Did you see anything last night? Eleanor's pause lasted too long. Adam's eyes narrowed. Not suspicion, fear. Ellie, he said quietly. You have to tell me. Eleanor forced words out. A light. For a second. Adam stared at the ceiling as if he could peel it open with his eyes. Then he said something that frightened her more than the click. We're not safe, he murmured. Not dramatic. Not shouted. Just spoken like a conclusion he hated. Margaret Pritchard knocked at noon. Not with biscuits this time. With nothing in her hands. Eleanor opened the door and immediately sensed the shift. Margaret's posture tighter, her expression composed in a way that suggested she had rehearsed calm. I saw the police, Margaret said softly. Adam appeared behind Eleanor in the hall, face hard. Did you? Margaret's eyes flicked past them into the house, quick and assessing. We don't like fuss, she said. Eleanor kept her voice level. We found a camera inside the wall. Margaret's mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. No, she said, not disbelief correction. Eleanor stared. Excuse me? Margaret's voice remained polite. You're mistaken. Houses like this have odd features, old wiring, old sensors. People panic. Adam stepped forward. We have photographs. Margaret's eyes held his, unflinching. Photographs of what you think you saw. Eleanor felt the skin at the back of her neck prickle. Margaret wasn't defending Rupert with passion. She was defending quiet. This street is stable, Margaret continued. We keep things contained. It's why people live here. Contained? Eleanor understood then. The neighborhood itself was part of the system, not through evil, through preference, through comfort, through the desire to maintain the story of safety at any cost. Adam's voice sharpened. Where is Rupert Hale? Margaret hesitated. A fraction of a second. Gone, she said. To where? Margaret smiled faintly, as if the question was childish. Away. Eleanor said softly, You know more than you're saying. Margaret's eyes hardened. You'll ruin your own lives making noise, and nobody will thank you. She turned to leave, then paused. Almost gently, she added, If you want peace, stop looking. Then she walked away. Eleanor closed the door and felt, with sudden clarity, that the street was not on their side. The street had already chosen what it wanted to be true. Celia Markham arrived the next day, unannounced. She looked immaculate, as always, coat cut sharply, hair smooth, eyes calm with a professional kind of warmth. I heard you've had concerns, she said, as if discussing a damp patch. Adam didn't invite her in. He stood in the doorway like a barrier. From who? He asked. Celia smiled. Neighbours talk. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. You spoke to Rupert. Celia's smile didn't change. Of course. Adam's voice remained controlled, but it had teeth now. We want his direct contact details. Celia's gaze held his, steady. I don't think that would be wise. Again, that word, wise. As if their request was not reasonable, but dangerous. Eleanor watched Celia carefully. She was too calm for someone walking into a hostile situation. Too protected, as if she knew she couldn't be touched here. Did he install cameras? Eleanor asked quietly. Celia's eyes blinked once. A tiny delay, then the smooth expression returned. Mr. Hale is a private man, Celia said. He values security. Security for who? Adam snapped. Celia turned her head slightly, as if considering the most socially acceptable answer. For himself, she said, and her tone made the answer sound normal. Eleanor stepped closer. Why was the floor plan sent to us? Celia's gaze sharpened for a moment, interest, almost. What floor plan? She asked. Eleanor held up her phone, the PDF open, the labels visible. Observation point. Celia looked for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Then she smiled gently. That isn't part of the standard property pack. It came from your side, Adam said. Celia's voice stayed soft. Things get mixed up. Mistakes happen. Buying is stressful. People fixate. The same language. The same pathologizing. The same subtle attempt to make Eleanor feel ashamed of noticing. Eleanor's voice was calm, but it trembled underneath. We saw a camera in the wall. Celia's smile turned sympathetic, almost maternal. Eleanor, I think you've frightened yourself. Eleanor flinched at hearing her name. Celia said it like they were familiar. Adam noticed too. How do you know her name? Celia paused. Just long enough. I've read the paperwork, she said smoothly. It's my job. But the pause had already landed, like a small crack in glass. Before leaving, Celia's gaze drifted upward toward the ceiling, toward the landing, toward the spaces that shouldn't exist. Then she looked at Eleanor with a softness that didn't reach her eyes. The trick, she said quietly, is not to fight the house. It always wins. She stepped out, and as Adam closed the door, Eleanor realized something that made her blood run cold. Celia wasn't warning them as a friend. She was reminding them of a rule. The next week, the pressure stopped being subtle. Adam's work changed first. He worked in compliance risk oversight. His professional identity was built on being calm, credible, rational, the kind of man people trust with other people's mistakes. On Monday, his manager called him in, voice gentle. There are concerns, she said. About your focus. Adam frowned. From who? She didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. Perhaps you've had stress at home, she added. We've had an anonymous message. It suggests you're not well. Adam's face tightened, the shame arriving before anger. What message? He asked. The manager smiled with professional sadness. I can't share specifics, but we want to support you. Support? The polite blade? Adam came home pale. They're suspending me pending review, he said flatly. Eleanor stared. On what basis? Adam swallowed. On the basis that someone told them I'm unstable. Eleanor felt something twist inside her. The system wasn't only watching. It was shaping their story. Then Eleanor's client emailed her, We're pausing the contract. There are concerns. No accusation, no facts, just a soft withdrawal of trust. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table reading the message again and again, and each time the same thought returned. This is coordinated. Not by one person alone. By structure. By connections. By a network of quiet influence that didn't need to shout to be effective. Eleanor did what she always did when reality became unbearable. She researched. She found Rupert Hale's name in company registries linked to obscure entities, property consultancies, security services, residential innovation firms that dissolved and reappeared with slight variations. Then she found a local business article, old, unglamorous, written like praise. A photograph showed Rupert. Neat hair, charming smile, charity plaque in the background. The caption described him as a discreet pioneer in bespoke residential monitoring solutions. Eleanor read the phrase twice. Monitoring. Solutions. Residential. Language that makes surveillance sound like care. She printed the article and placed it in front of Adam. He read it slowly. His eyes moved across the words as if each one was removing something from him. "This house," he murmured. Eleanor nodded. "It isn't just a home." Adam looked up, voice hoarse. "It's a demonstration." Eleanor felt the midpoint truth settle into place like a door locking. They weren't being watched because Rupert was perverse or curious. They were being watched because the house had been designed to watch. And whoever controlled it wasn't improvising. They were operating a system that expected occupants to comply. Adam stared at the paper, then whispered, "Why would the plan be sent to us?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. Because it was bait. Because someone wanted to see what they would do with language. Because noticing was being tested. Eleanor thought of Celia's eyes sharpening for a fraction of a second when she saw the PDF, and she realized something worse. They were no longer simply victims. They were variables. It happened on a Tuesday, in the hour after lunch, when the world is meant to be most ordinary. Eleanor was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when she heard Adam upstairs. Not his usual footsteps, those were measured, purposeful. This was different. Fast, off rhythm, then his voice, sharp, too loud. "Ellie." Eleanor wiped her hands on a towel and went up. Adam stood in the study with his laptop open, face drained of colour. He looked as though he'd been running, though he hadn't moved from the room. "Come here," he said. Eleanor stepped beside him and followed his gaze to the screen. An email. No subject line. No sender name, only a string of letters and numbers. The message contained one sentence. "We heard you say demonstration." Eleanor stared, slow ice spreading through her chest. Adam whispered, "We didn't write that anywhere." Below the sentence was an attachment. A short video file. Eleanor's mouth went dry. "Don't?" Adam clicked it. The video opened. At first, it was darkness. Grainy, low light, a faint hiss of audio. Then the image sharpened into their living room. Eleanor recognized it instantly, not because of the furniture, which was still minimal, but because of the angle. High corner, slightly tilted. The vantage point of something mounted above eye level. Their home seen from inside. Eleanor's pulse hammered. A moment later, she and Adam entered the frame. It was yesterday evening. The clothes matched. The timestamp in the corner was recent. They were standing by the window, talking quietly. The audio was clear enough to understand. Adam's own voice, speaking with weary certainty. "It's a demonstration." Eleanor's voice. Lower. "Not just the house. It's the network." Eleanor watched herself on screen, watched her own posture, her own hand gestures, and felt something deeply violating settle into her bones. This wasn't a hidden camera that recorded occasionally. This was active, maintained, curated. Then the video shifted slightly, like the camera was being adjusted. A shadow passed close to the lens. Not a person entering the room. A shadow near the camera. Inside the wall, someone moving in the space where the device was mounted. Eleanor's breath caught. The video ended. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Adam's hands were trembling on the desk. He tried to hide it by clasping them, but the tremor remained. Eleanor's mind did what it always did when the truth became too large. It tried to reduce it to a manageable shape. They're in the walls. They're listening. They have access. They can see us. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sentence. "We heard you say demonstration." Not, "We recorded you." Not, "We watched you." Heard. As if the house itself was an ear. As if the pressure system wasn't limited to devices, it was built into the structure. Eleanor looked at Adam. "They're not hiding anymore." Adam swallowed. "They're correcting us." Eleanor's throat tightened. "No, She shook her head slowly, understanding arriving like a slow blade. They're training us. Adam stared at her. What? Eleanor spoke carefully, because every word felt like it might be overheard and used. They're showing us what they can do, so we stop trying. They want us to know resistance has a cost. Adam's face tightened with anger that had nowhere to go. I'm going to the police again, he said. Eleanor didn't stop him. But she felt a cold certainty. The police weren't the center of this story. They were a side character in a system designed to outlast intervention. Callum Reed returned with a second officer. Older, more formal, less apologetic. They listened. They watched the video file on Adam's laptop. The older officer's expression stayed smooth, trained neutrality, but something in his eyes shifted the moment the shadow passed close to the camera lens. He cleared his throat. This is serious, he said. Eleanor's chest loosened a fraction. Then he added, carefully, we'll need to take the device as evidence, if it exists. Adam pointed at the empty cavity behind the skirting. It was there. It was removed. The older officer nodded. Then we need to locate it. Eleanor said, it's inside the walls. Callum Reed's gaze flicked upward, as if remembering Margaret's phrase about thick walls. The older officer made a note. We can request access from the property owner. Adam's face tightened. We are the owners. The older officer hesitated, just enough to be felt. Owners of the property, he said slowly. But there may be additional structures, servicing systems, modifications that were not disclosed. Eleanor stared. That's the point. They were not disclosed. The older officer's tone became softer, more cautious. Mr. Hale has legal representation. Adam laughed once, sharp and humorless. Of course he does. Eleanor watched the older officer's posture subtly tighten, as if the name Rupert Hale carried weight in the wrong direction. Then came the moment that killed her remaining faith. The older officer said, in the meantime, we advise you to avoid escalating. Don't confront anyone directly. Don't post anything online. Eleanor's voice went thin. Why? He met her eyes and, for the first time, let honesty show through his professional mask. Because you don't know who you're dealing with, he said quietly. Eleanor felt a flash of something bitter. I think we do, she replied. The older officer did not argue. He only nodded once, like a man acknowledging limits. They left with promises of review and follow-up. When the door closed, Adam stood very still. Eleanor saw something painful in him. A man realizing authority was not a wall you could lean against. It was a door that could close. The first loss was professional. Adam's suspension became official. A letter arrived polite, corporate, merciless. Pending assessment. He read it twice, then placed it face down on the table like an object that could infect the air. Eleanor's client list thinned. She didn't receive direct accusations, only quiet withdrawals. Contracts paused. Projects reassigned. Emails that used soft language to do hard damage. The second loss was social. People stopped meeting Eleanor's eyes on the street. Neighbours who had smiled once now offered brief nods, then looked past her as if she had become embarrassing. A quiet rumour had spread, not a story about cameras, a story about instability. Eleanor heard it in fragments, the way you hear your own name spoken softly behind you. She's not well. They're saying strange things. Poor Adam. The system wasn't just watching them. It was rewriting them. Then came the loss that made everything irreversible. On a Thursday evening, Eleanor returned from the corner shop to find their front door slightly ajar. Not forced. Not broken. Just open. She froze on the step, shopping bag hanging from her wrist. Inside, the hallway light was on. They never left it on. Eleanor stepped in slowly. Adam? She called. No answer. She moved deeper, heart punching against her ribs. The house was too quiet. Then she saw it on the hallway wall opposite the bedroom door. The black tape Adam had placed over the peephole was gone, not ripped, removed cleanly. And beneath it, arranged with calm precision, someone had stuck a small square of paper, a typed note. You can't seal what you don't own. Eleanor's mouth went cold. She didn't move for several seconds. She couldn't. Because the note didn't feel like a threat, it felt like a lesson. When Adam came home and read it, his face altered in a way Eleanor hadn't seen before. Not fear, humiliation. A man who has been shown, clearly, that his attempts at protection are decorative. That night he slept badly. He woke at every sound. He checked locks repeatedly, as if repetition might create safety. Eleanor lay awake, listening to him, listening to the fragile rhythm of a person unraveling. Then, near 3 a.m., she heard something else. A soft movement inside the wall. Not a creak. A careful shift. And a low exhale that sounded almost amused. Eleanor sat up, eyes fixed on the dark. She didn't wake Adam. She didn't want to share the sound, because sharing would make it real in a way neither of them could bear. But she knew. Someone was close, not outside, inside the house's hidden spaces, breathing. By morning, Adam had reached a conclusion. "We're leaving," he said. Not dramatic, practical, like moving house was a solvable problem. Eleanor nodded. "Where?" "Hotel," he said. "Anywhere that isn't here." They packed quickly, hands shaking, movements sharp. Eleanor grabbed her laptop and essential documents. Adam stuffed clothes into a bag with frantic efficiency. They moved toward the front door. Adam punched the keypad. Nothing. He tried again. A brief glow, then dead. Eleanor's breath hitched. "Adam." He yanked at the handle. The lock held. He tried the back door. Same. Not jammed. Not broken. Simply sealed. Adam stared at the door as if it had betrayed him personally. Eleanor's heart hammered. The house wasn't preventing entry. It was preventing exit. Adam backed away, breathing hard. "This is illegal." Eleanor heard her own voice come out calm, flat. "That doesn't matter if no one stops it." Adam turned to her, eyes wild. "We call the police." Eleanor lifted her phone. Signal. She dialed. The call failed immediately. Not no service. Failed. As if the line had been cut by someone who didn't need to touch the phone. Adam tried next. Failed. They stood in the hallway with bags at their feet, as if ready to depart from a place that refused to release them. Then the house did something that made Eleanor's blood turn to ice. The hallway lights flickered once, then stabilized like a stage being prepared. A lamp upstairs clicked on in the study. Then the living room lamp. Then the kitchen under-cabinet glow. The house illuminating itself, calmly, deliberately. As if the system wanted them to be seen, Eleanor heard Adam whisper, "No." Then, softly, from somewhere inside the walls came a voice. Calm. Controlled. Familiar. Eleanor. Her name spoken the way a professional might speak it, measured, patient, almost kind. Eleanor froze. Adam's voice came out raw. "Who are you?" A pause, as if the voice was considering how much to reveal. Then, "You've made this difficult." Eleanor forced words out. "We're leaving." The voice replied gently, "No, you're not." Adam stepped forward, rage shaking him. "Show yourself." Silence. Then the voice, almost amused. "I don't need to." A click. A different sound now, not the earlier clicks. This was deeper, heavier. A door inside, the walls closing. Locking. Adam's face drained. He turned toward Eleanor, and she saw the breaking point approach, not theatrically, not in a shout, but in the slow collapse of certainty. Eleanor whispered, "Rupert." The voice didn't confirm immediately. It didn't need to. It said, softly, "I forgot something." Eleanor's throat tightened. "What did you forget?" A pause. Then the voice, in the tone of someone admitting a technical error. A line in the plan. One that gave you language. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. The floor plan wasn't a mistake. It had been bait. A test. They had failed by noticing. The voice continued, calm as a lecture. "I don't like being noticed." Adam whispered, "You're in the walls." The voice replied, still gentle, "This house has systems. It has roots. It has access. It has purpose." Eleanor's mouth went dry. Why? Another pause, as if the question was naive. Then, because people pay for quiet, they pay for control, they pay to know what happens in rooms they don't enter. Eleanor's skin crawled. Adam's voice broke. We're not part of that. The voice replied, calm. You bought the story, not the structure. Eleanor felt Adam's hand reach for hers, his grip tight, shaking. The voice softened, almost sympathetic. Stop looking, it said. Live here like normal people. If you can't, you'll become the problem. Then, as cleanly as a switch flipping, all the lights went out. Total darkness. Silence. Except for Adam's breathing fast, shallow, terrified. And somewhere inside the walls, a faint movement. A presence settling back into place. Eleanor stood in the dark, and something inside her shifted. Not courage. Not hope. A colder thing. A new understanding. This wasn't a haunted house story. This was a controlled environment. And the person controlling it wasn't improvising. He was protected, connected, practiced. He didn't need to hurt them to win. He only needed to reshape them until they stopped resisting. Eleanor squeezed Adam's hand. In the darkness, she whispered the first true thing she'd said since moving in. We are not going to be saved. Adam's breath hitched. Eleanor listened past Adam, past the silence toward the walls, and she understood what Rupert Hale had built here. A place where people disappear without leaving. A place where truth can be removed like a camera from a cavity. A place that doesn't just watch, it corrects. Morning arrived without apology. Light slipped through the curtains, as if the night had not happened, as if the house had not sealed itself, spoken, demonstrated ownership. Birds sounded normal outside. A car door closed somewhere down the street. The world resumed its schedule. Eleanor lay still, listening. No clicks. No hum. No voice. Adam slept in fragments beside her, waking every few minutes as if checking whether reality had returned. When he finally sat up, his eyes were rimmed red, his posture altered. He moved like someone who had learned too quickly how little control he possessed. The locks, he said hoarsely. They tested them. Every door opened. Every window functioned. Phones worked again. Signal returned as if it had never left. The house had reset itself. Eleanor felt a wave of anger then, not loud, not explosive, but precise. The kind of anger that comes when someone rearranges your sense of time. They're letting us breathe, she said quietly. Adam looked at her. Why? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Because the truth felt dangerous to say aloud. Because breathing was part of the lesson. The police returned that afternoon. Not Callum Reed alone this time. A senior officer accompanied him, older, heavier, careful with his words. They listened again. They reviewed the video file. They noted the note left in the hallway. They asked questions that felt procedural rather than urgent. Any signs of forced entry? No. Any witnesses? No. Any physical evidence currently present? Eleanor almost laughed. Define present, she said. The senior officer glanced at her, then at Adam. We need to be cautious, he said. These are serious allegations. Allegations? Not experiences. Not violations. Allegations? We'll consult with legal, he continued. There are property complexities. Adam's jaw clenched. He was inside the house. The officer nodded slowly. That's what you believe. Eleanor felt the language slide, carefully, away from reality. After they left, Adam sat at the table staring at his hands. They're not coming back, he said. Eleanor didn't contradict him. She had already felt the shift, the moment when institutions decide a problem is inconvenient rather than solvable. Eleanor changed tactics. She stopped trying to convince authorities. She started documenting for strangers. She wrote not emotionally, not theatrically, but clinically. Dates, times, descriptions, language stripped of panic. She described the architecture, the plan, the modifications, the patterns of disappearance. She sent it to journalists. Most didn't respond. Some replied with cautious interest, then went quiet. Then one email arrived that didn't vanish. From Francis Bishop. Subject: North London property. Francis asked questions that mattered. Where exactly were the voids? How thick were the walls? Who had brokered the sale? What companies had Rupert Hale been connected to? Eleanor answered carefully. Francis didn't promise anything. She said, I want to see it. Adam Arjeed. They'll know, he said. They already do, Eleanor replied. The only difference is whether we're alone. Francis arrived with a small camera and a notebook. No dramatic equipment, no entourage. She moved through the house slowly, absorbing details Eleanor had learned to notice. The odd angles, the unnecessary thickness of certain walls, the way sound behaved. She studied the floor plan. Then she stood in the study, eyes narrowing. Here, she said, this void doesn't make sense unless it connects. They searched patiently. Not frantic, not desperate. Methodical. It took time, but eventually Francis found the seam, a near-invisible line beneath the desk, disguised with texture rather than paint. They pressed. The wall panel slid open. Behind it was a corridor. Not rough, not improvised. Finished. Painted. Ventilated. Wide enough for a person to move through without scraping skin. Eleanor felt her knees weaken not from fear, but from confirmation. This isn't a modification, Francis said quietly. It's design. Then, a sound. A soft shift inside the corridor. A breath. Not startled. Measured. Francis's hand flew to her mouth. Adam stepped back instinctively. Eleanor didn't move. Because the worst part wasn't that someone was there. It was that they had never stopped being there. Francis raised her camera. Not to hide. Not to threaten. To record. She started live streaming. No preface. No introduction. Just reality unfolding in real time. I'm in a private residence in North London, she said steadily. There is a hidden access corridor behind the walls. Evidence suggests long-term surveillance of occupants. The feed spread faster than any formal report ever could. Screenshots multiplied. Comments exploded. People recorded the recording. Visibility, the one variable Rupert Hale had not designed for, began to overwhelm the system. Then he stepped out. Rupert Hale. Neatly dressed. Calm. Socially unremarkable in the way powerful men often are. He raised his hands slightly, not surrender, but civility. This is unnecessary, he said gently. Francis didn't stop filming. Are you Rupert Hale? Yes. Why are you inside this house? Rupert glanced at Eleanor. Because they wouldn't stop noticing. Eleanor's voice was quiet. We live here. Rupert nodded, indulgent. You occupy here. The distinction landed heavily. This is illegal, Francis said. Rupert smiled faintly. Is it? Or is it simply unregulated? Voices gathered in the hallway. Neighbours. Phones raised. Whispers. Margaret Pritchard stood pale near the door. Turn that off, she hissed. You're making it worse. Francis replied, For who? Sirens approached. More than before, the senior officer returned this time with backup. The room filled with bodies, cameras, witnesses. Rupert's composure held, but Eleanor saw the flaw. Not fear. Annoyance. His structure depended on quiet cooperation. And quiet had been broken. The officer ordered Rupert detained for questioning. As he was led away, Rupert looked at Eleanor. Not hatred. Not anger. A calm assessment. You've changed the conditions, he said softly. That has consequences. Eleanor met his gaze. So does watching people without consent, she replied. Rupert said nothing more. He didn't need to. The investigation did not end Rupert Hale. It only slowed him. The story burned briefly headlines, opinion pieces, debates about privacy and experimental architecture. For a week, people were outraged in the abstract. For another, they were curious. Then something quieter happened. The story lost its shape. No dramatic charges stuck. No definitive verdict arrived. Too many layers. Too many intermediaries. Too many permissions signed without being read. Rupert Hale was never convicted of surveillance. He was questioned, advised, released. His name did not appear in court records, only in footnotes, redactions, settlements. The corridors were sealed. The house was declared structurally amended. The case was classified as a property dispute with unauthorized modifications. Language did what it always does. It softened reality until it became survivable for everyone except the people inside it. Adam did not recover. Not in any clean, visible way. He found work again eventually, but it was smaller, quieter, provisional. People spoke to him differently now, careful, sympathetic, distant. A man who has been watched too closely never quite re-enters the world the same way. Eleanor noticed it in small things. The way Adam checked ceilings in cafes, the way he positioned himself in rooms, the way silence now made him restless instead of calm. Their marriage did not end dramatically. It thinned. Trust does not break loudly. It erodes when safety becomes theoretical. They separated a year later, gently, without blame. Eleanor understood. Love requires privacy to breathe, and privacy was something she no longer possessed. The house was sold again, not to a family, to a holding company, renovated, rebranded, listed as a heritage smart residence. The corridors were still there, just reclassified. Maintenance access, environmental monitoring, security compliance. Different words, same geometry. Eleanor found the listing online months later, accidentally. She stared at the photos, new furniture, warmer lighting, staged happiness. In one image, a decorative mirror hung in the hallway. She recognized the proportions immediately. Behind it was the peephole, still aligned perfectly with where a bed would be. The email arrived on a quiet evening. No sender, no subject, just an attachment. A video. Eleanor hesitated before opening it. Then she did. The footage was not from her old house. It showed a different living room, different people. A young couple laughing, relaxed, unaware. The camera angle was familiar. High corner, slight tilt, careful framing. Then text appeared over the footage. Version 14 performs better. Eleanor felt the room narrow around her. Another line followed. Thank you for your feedback. She closed the laptop slowly. Outside, across the street, a light switched off in a second-floor window. Not abruptly. Deliberately. As if someone had finished watching. Eleanor stood alone in her flat, listening to the city breathe. No clicks, no hums, no visible threat. But she understood now what Rupert Hale had meant. The house had not been the experiment. She had been. So had Adam. So had every occupant who noticed too much, too quickly. Rupert Hale did not need to watch everyone. Only enough people to perfect the system. Eleanor turned off the light and stood in the dark, very still. For the first time, she did not listen for a sound. She listened for the absence of one. Because now she knew. Silence was not safety. It was confirmation.